Hi, I'm Drew Wilson from FreezeNet. Today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. The table is back out, and of course that means, you know one thing, show and tell time. And today I decided to go ahead and do a bit of a retrospective on the Xbox 360 titles I played this year. Of course, that being 2022, and just offer some general ideas and thoughts on what my experience was like so far. Now, obviously, on the beginning of 2022, I introduced the Xbox 360, and of course, as you can imagine, I actually have very little to no experience with that particular console. And of course, I had almost no experience whatsoever. Actually, I would say pretty much no experience with the whole console line altogether. But of course, I have a lot of experience with other games prior to the release of those video games, so I was going to be one interesting experience, and I know a lot of people have a lot of fond memories, so I wanted to try and see if I could, share those same ideas. And as the year progressed, I have to say this has been a real journey of expectation versus reality. And the expectations were one thing, and reality ended up being pretty much almost the exact opposite of what I was expecting throughout the entire year. So I'll go over what I mean by that, but you'll notice that this is going to be a very long-running theme. So my thinking was that I would go ahead and try and get this console off to a really strong start. So what are games that people have a lot of fond memories about? What do people really enjoy playing? And, just really go ahead and go head on into those particular games to kind of get this console experience off to a really strong start. So I started off with something I had zero idea about in terms of actually having experience playing in the first place. And that, of course, is Gears of War. So this is Gears of War 1. And this is Gears of War 2. And Gears of War 3. So a lot of these games, I know a lot of people have said it's absolutely fantastic series, really enjoyed it, some of the best first-person shooter games they've ever played. And I have to wonder as I played through them, what other people's experience was like when they got into this in the first place, because my experience was that I have a lot of, I know about other shooters that were released prior to this series. So examples include Perfect Dark, GoldenEye 007, Duke Nukem 3D, Doom, Time Splitters, and there was a lot of great innovation, a lot of really interesting stuff with those games. So that may have, in the end, ultimately colored my judgment on these particular games, because when I got into this, it had an interesting concept about reloading. They had that little indicator going across, and you had to reload at a specific time to do a fast reload and better power for your ammunition. But beyond that, I really didn't see anything that was particularly innovative or interesting. Sure, it had a lot of blood, guts, and gore that did have that, but I've already experienced that with a game like Turok 2 Seeds of Evil, for instance, so it's nothing I hadn't seen before. But this that seemed to be the selling point, and unfortunately for this series, if you want to win me over, it takes more than a little blood splatter to get my interest. And unfortunately, this series didn't seem to offer much more beyond the storyline and a little bit of blood splatter, and even the storyline to me was a little bit hit and miss. So I thought, okay, well, maybe it was this particular series that I wasn't really particularly fond of, so I decided to go ahead and pull out the big guns. And of course, that was with the Halo series, the flagship game of the console. So I had Halo 2, which was backwards compatible with the Xbox 360. Because I've already played the first Halo game, and I thought I wanted to have the complete experience. And then I moved on to Halo 3, then Halo 3 ODST, Halo Reach, and of course, Halo 4. So a lot of people said that those games were like the best experience they've ever had. I had good expectations of this as well, and I thought, maybe it's going to be like, it could be like Sega, like my experience with Sega Genesis and Sonic the Hedgehog, in that I may not agree that it's like the best game ever, but I'm at least going to be in for a good time, and I would have a lot of fun anyway. And I have to say, once again, my expectations were dead wrong, and I found the series to be, for the most part, pretty bland and boring. Linear level design, repetitive level design, especially with this, because it felt like Lego blocks you were running through. And sure, it had some interesting ideas, like with items, but the items weren't that well implemented. Like cloaking, for instance, like it only offered like a brief second of delay for enemies before they find where you are, and then just know exactly where you are at all times right afterwards, so it was borderline useless. And I just never really got into the series, but there was sort of an exception. And of course, this might be weird for a lot of fans, but the exception to that was, of course, Halo 3 ODST. And in that game, at least it felt like the level design was, fully fleshed out. And it wasn't just like a long haul corridor thing going on with it. Like it actually felt like you were in an actual location that could be theoretically possible. And of course you had built-in navigation, so you're never really lost when you played this game. And sure, it took a little bit to kind of get used to the controls, but beyond that, I didn't mind the game at all. My only complaint with that particular game was that it was a little bit short, which is actually a very common complaint among other people who play the game. But otherwise, I actually thought it was a pretty reasonable game. And that was in contrast to the other 4 games, which I didn't think were that great. Some, like Halo 4, for instance, yeah, it had introduced a whole bunch of weapons, but it was more or less a reskin of other weapon sets, that sort of thing. So it didn't really jive with me, the whole series. So at this point, I started getting worried. Like, here are all these highly acclaimed video games, and I only enjoyed maybe one of them somewhat. And I thought, when I went into the Xbox 360, I didn't have the intention of turning it into a let's bash Xbox, because that was not my intention at all. But when you have an experience like, well, none of these games except for maybe that was even remotely interesting, well, it's either I tell the truth and be honest, or I just, lie to you and say, oh, it's great because other people said it was, even though I didn't really like it. So I just opted for telling the truth and having my honest assessment. So I was really worried at that point, and I started digging around for other games I could play. And another series that the Xbox 360 is well known for is, of course, the Forza series. Now, I had actually fairly low expectations with this series because I've played a number of Gran Turismo games already. And I thought, Gran Turismo games, they're okay. Some of the earliest ones may be pretty good, actually quite good. But after a while, it just felt like the same game over and over again. So I didn't exactly have the strongest expectations for these games. And once again, continuing the theme, my expectations were completely wrong. When I played Forza Motorsport 2, I had an absolute blast with this. The way the game progressed, the way the game felt, almost everything about it, I actually thoroughly enjoyed. And in fact, I would say I would highly recommend playing this particular game. And you might look at Forza Motorsport and say, wait a second, I don't remember you actually playing this particular game on the channel. And you would be right. My intention was to actually showcase this game. However, the backwards compatibility didn't work, and the Xbox website says that this game is actually backwards compatible with the Xbox 360, and I connected the Xbox to Xbox Live, hoping that it would update, and I even went so far as to find an old FAT32 system, FAT32 being a requirement for the Xbox to read. And I put the installation files onto the root, which you're supposed to do, and the Xbox is supposed to detect it and update accordingly, but nothing worked. All I got was an error message that said, this game is not compatible with your current version of Xbox. So I kind of threw my hands up in the air and said, okay, I think I've done more than enough that would be considered what is reasonable for your average consumer to do to try and make this game work. So I ended up giving it, the first 0 in the history because it didn't boot, but I do have some other plans for this game, so stay tuned for that. Now, as I continued along, I thought, my expectations are pretty wildly out of whack. Maybe digging beneath the surface is a good idea, and maybe I'll get some other interesting hits that people might not have otherwise heard of. So I decided to try Tetris Evolution. And I thought, you know what? It's kind of hard to mess up a Tetris game because the core concept is already there. You just need to add a few interesting, innovative twists, and you are good to go. And I thought, I couldn't go wrong with this game. However, I did go wrong with this game. I ended up noticing that it was just the basics of the most basic game that was put together, and it was a bit like Road and Track presents Need for Speed, where all the options are just available right up front, and the player just goes accordingly. There's no real sense of progression. In fact, the only thing that really saved this was the achievements. And the achievements did add some interesting challenge to the game, but other than that, I didn't really find this to be a particularly strong title. And the only reason I would say you would want to buy this game is if you absolutely want to play a Tetris game on an Xbox 360, then go ahead and knock yourself out. Other than that, it's really hard to justify because there's a lot of other better options out there, in my opinion. And of course, this leads me to the final game I played in 2022, and that is, of course, Bejeweled 3. And my expectations were very low. It was because Bejeweled 3, it was basically a Flash title, and, well, the Bejeweled series was basically Flash titles, and I honestly didn't think it would be all that big of a deal. However, when I actually got into the game, it was, at first I thought, well, maybe maybe it wasn't going to be justifiable as a console game. But then as I got deeper, it was actually surprisingly good. It took the core concept, and it actually managed to find a whole bunch of different creative modes that actually made this game quite interesting to play. So I would say this is actually a pretty good title, especially if you're into puzzle games. So definitely something I would give a thumbs up to. Now, looking at all these games, the question was, okay, what would I recommend? And there were 3 recommendations I do have. That is, of course, Halo 3 ODST, Forza Motorsport 2, and of course, Bejeweled 3. I know this is probably not something that anyone will agree with, but those end up being my recommendations in my honest opinion. And if I had to pick a favorite, there is no question it would be Forza Motorsport 2. This is my absolute favorite of this lot. Just the way it played, how comfortable I felt playing it, the progression, so much about this just worked. So that is my recommendation for this whole series so far. And now, of course, as time goes on, I will try and play more Xbox 360 titles to try and see what other hidden gems there happens to be in here. And I've already gotten a lot of surprises, so maybe this console will have more surprises. So I wanted to hear from you. Did you agree with my selection? Probably didn't, but let me know in the comments below what you thought. What were your favorite titles of this whole series so far? Did you agree with some of my selections? Maybe you agree with my choice of Forza Motorsport 2. I don't know. Let me know in the comments below. So if you want to support this channel, there's plenty of ways you can do it. You can drop us a like, let us know hey you're doing a great job, keep up the good work. You can also subscribe to the YouTube channel. That helps us out tremendously. You can also check out our website, freezenet.ca, for all the news and music reviews, video game reviews, and so much more. There's also a Patreon page at patreon.com/freezenet. You can subscribe and get some cool stuff. You can also check us out on coffee.com/freezenet, and that you can do a one-time donation as well if you like. So I guess that is all for now, and until next time, keep it cool.